Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My life changed when I got arrested at my own home by my 17-year-old stepdaughter, who decided to make one false accusation too many. My name is Wallace, and this is how a teenage girl's lies destroyed my marriage, but also freed me from a family that saw me as nothing more than a walking ATM. The whole situation started back in 2018 when I met Linda, my stepdaughter's mother. I was 39, had my own electrical contracting business, and owned a nice 3-bedroom house that I'd worked hard to pay off completely. Linda was 36, working part-time as a medical receptionist, and had an 11-year-old daughter named Ashley from a previous long-term relationship. Linda seemed like a good woman who'd had some tough breaks. Ashley's father wasn't involved in her life at all, no child support, no visits, no contact whatsoever. Linda was doing her best to raise Ashley alone while working just enough hours to qualify for health insurance, but not so many that she'd lose her housing assistance. When we started dating, I could see they were struggling financially, but I respected Linda's independence and work ethic. Ashley was a sweet kid when I first met her. She was quiet and polite, did well in school, and seemed genuinely happy when Linda and I started spending time together. She'd ask me questions about my work, wanted to know how electrical systems worked, and would help me with small projects around my house when they visited on weekends. After dating for about a year and a half, Linda and I decided to get married. It made practical sense. I had a stable home and income, and they needed stability. Ashley was starting middle school and could benefit from living in a better school district. Linda could keep her part-time job for the health insurance, while I covered the major expenses. When we got married, Linda and Ashley moved into my house. The transition seemed to go smoothly. Ashley seemed to enjoy having her own room that was bigger than anywhere she'd lived before, and Linda was relieved not to worry about rent and utilities every month. I tried to be a good stepfather without overstepping boundaries. I helped Ashley with homework when she asked, drove her to her games practice and games, and made sure she had what she needed for school. Linda handled most of the discipline and parenting decisions, but Ashley seemed to respect me and follow the house rules I'd established. Financially, I was covering almost everything. Since the house was paid for, I cover utilities and groceries for 3 people. Linda's part-time income covered her car payment and personal expenses, but everything else was coming from me. I didn't mind supporting my new family. My business was doing well, and I'd always planned to share my success with a wife and children someday. Ashley wasn't my biological daughter, but I was committed to treating her like she was. We were also trying to give her a sibling. I started a small college fund for her and made sure she could participate in activities that Linda couldn't have afforded on her own. The first sign of trouble came when Ashley was 14 years old and starting to hit those difficult middle school years. She began testing boundaries with both Linda and me, lying about homework assignments and trying to play us against each other when she wanted something. This seemed like normal teenage behavior, and Linda and I worked together to maintain consistent rules and consequences. But what I didn't realize was that Ashley was also starting to resent my authority in my house. She'd lived there for years, and I think she forgot that I'd owned the house for years before they moved in. When I'd ask her to do chores or follow rules, she'd sometimes mutter things like, "You can't tell me what to do," or "You do too much for a stepfather." By the next year, these muttered complaints had become more direct. Ashley would argue that since Linda was her mother, Linda should make all the decisions about her rules and privileges. She'd tell Linda that I was being too strict or unfair, trying to get Linda to overrule my decisions. This created tension between Linda and me, because I felt like Ashley was deliberately trying to undermine my role as a parent figure in my own home. The real problem started after Ashley's 15th birthday. I was working in my home office one evening when Linda came in looking upset. She said Ashley had come to her crying, saying that I'd been looking at her weird when she walked from her bedroom to the bathroom in her pajamas. According to Ashley, I'd watched her in a way that made her uncomfortable. I was completely shocked by this accusation. I explained to Linda that I'd barely seen Ashley that evening. I'd been focused on work I brought home. If I glanced up when she walked by, it was purely coincidental, and certainly not inappropriate. But Ashley was in her room crying, and Linda felt like she had to take her daughter's concerns seriously. This created the first real crisis in our marriage. Linda didn't exactly accuse me of anything, but she also didn't dismiss Ashley's claims. She suggested that maybe I should be more careful about my behavior around Ashley, which made me feel like she thought there might be some truth to what Ashley was saying. From that point forward, I started being extremely careful around Ashley. I'd avoid making eye contact if she were in pajamas or casual clothes. I'd announce myself loudly when walking through common areas, so there wouldn't be any surprise encounters. I started working later hours to avoid being home during Ashley's after-school routine. But my extra caution didn't help the situation. If anything, Ashley seemed to interpret my careful behavior as evidence that I was guilty of something. She'd make comments to Linda about how I was acting weird or avoiding her. Linda would relay these concerns to me, and I felt like I was trapped in a situation where any behavior could be interpreted as suspicious. About 8 months after the first accusation, Ashley again claimed that I had brushed against her inappropriately when we passed each other in the kitchen hallway. She said I deliberately made physical contact when there was enough room to pass without touching. Again, I completely denied this. If any contact had occurred, it was purely accidental. The hallway was narrow, and we'd both been carrying things. But Ashley was 16 now, and her accusations were becoming more specific and serious. She cried to Linda about feeling unsafe. She said she was afraid to be alone with me and didn't know how to tell me to stop making her uncomfortable. Linda was torn between supporting her daughter and maintaining her marriage, but she was clearly starting to believe that something inappropriate was happening. This accusation led to our first serious marital counseling session. Linda insisted we needed professional help to address the problems in our family dynamic. The counselor listened to both Linda's concerns and my denials, but the whole session felt like an intervention designed to get me to admit to behavior I'd never engaged in. I started installing security cameras in the common areas of the house around this time. I told Linda it was for general home security, but really, I was trying to protect myself from false accusations. I made sure cameras covered the kitchen, living room, and hallways, anywhere Ashley and I might encounter each other. This hypervigilant behavior was exhausting and was destroying my relationship with both Ashley and Linda. Ashley seemed to enjoy the power she had over me. She'd make little comments about calling the police if I acted weird, and she'd use my fear of accusations to get her way in family decisions. I refused to be alone in any room with her. If Linda went to the store and left us both at home, I'd either leave the house myself or stay in my bedroom with the door open until Linda returned. Even the camera didn't save the situation, as Ashley made her third accusation a few months later, and this time she called the police. She claimed that I'd touched her this time inappropriately while she was doing homework at the kitchen table. According to her story, I'd come up behind her and placed my hand on her shoulder in a way that made her uncomfortable. And when she asked me to stop, I'd left my hand there for several more seconds and only removed it when she was shouting. 2 police officers came to the house that evening to take statements. I explained that I'd briefly touched Ashley's shoulder to get her attention before asking if she needed help with her homework, and that I'd removed my hand immediately when she seemed startled. The whole interaction had lasted maybe 2 seconds and was completely innocent. They took statements from all 3 of us. What I didn't know at the time was that this wasn't actually the 3rd accusation. It was the 4th. Ashley had apparently called the police about the previous incidents as well, but Linda hadn't told me about those calls. I found out later that there had been previous police reports I didn't know about, and the police had a file on our family dating back to Ashley's first complaint about me looking at her inappropriately. Ashley had been calling the police about me for over 2 years, and Linda had never told me about most of these calls. I was arrested that evening and spent the night in jail. The next morning, I was released on bond with a restraining order that prohibited me from returning home while the investigation was ongoing. I lodged into a hotel, then consulted with a divorce attorney because I was strongly considering separation from my wife, Linda, and her daughter, Ashley. The thought of divorce was a hard but necessary decision as I was starting to realize that my marriage might not survive this situation. My wife, Linda, was increasingly cold toward me even before this last situation, always questioning my motives and behavior. I wasn't going to make myself miserable by trying to make the marriage work. If I try to avoid being around, it will mean that Linda and I have no real relationship anymore, and Ashley will be getting the message that her false accusations were an effective way to control the adults in her life. Over the next 2 weeks, the police reviewed the security footage from my home cameras. The footage clearly showed that I never touched her like Ashley claimed. A clear timeline was established that proved Ashley's accusation was false. The district attorney's office subsequently declined to file charges and lifted the restraining order. I was told that the investigation had concluded and that I was free to return home. However, he also warned me that continued false accusations could eventually result in charges against Ashley for filing false police reports. During the time I spent alone, I'd made a decision about my marriage. The attorney had prepared divorce papers while we were waiting for the investigation to conclude, and I was ready to end this nightmare permanently. When I returned home, Linda opened the door and looked surprised to see me. Instead of welcoming me home or apologizing for what I'd been through, the first thing she said was, "Have you reflected on your actions?" She apparently still believed that I was somehow responsible for the situation, despite the security footage that had cleared me. Instead of answering her question, I handed Linda the divorce papers. She looked at them in shock, clearly not expecting this response. Before she could say anything, Ashley came running downstairs and saw what was happening. I decided to leave almost immediately. Ashley's reaction was immediate and extreme. She started screaming, "You can't leave us." But I don't care. I know they are in my house, but instead of trying to throw them out, I will let the court system do its thing. I would later find out why both my wife and stepdaughter were panicking when they saw the divorce papers. They realized what my leaving would mean financially. During the 2 weeks I'd been gone, the bills had been piling up because Linda's monthly income couldn't cover the household expenses. Linda had been trying to use credit cards to buy groceries, but the cards were already maxed out from previous financial emergencies. They had been praying for me to come home, not because they missed me or felt bad about what had happened, but because they needed my income to survive. The realization that they saw me purely as a source of money was both painful and liberating. It's clear that for years I'd been trying to build a family with Linda and Ashley, but they had never seen me as a husband and stepfather. I was just the person who paid for their lifestyle and absorbed Ashley's false accusations without fighting back. I don't know how, but as the divorce process started, Ashley texted me one night, begging as she realized I was serious about leaving. She offered to tell the police that she'd made mistakes and that I'd never done anything inappropriate. But it was too late for that kind of backtracking. The pattern of false accusations had destroyed any possibility of trust or normal family relationships. I couldn't continue living in fear of the next police call or the next manufactured crisis. Ashley had weaponized accusations of inappropriate behavior to control me and get attention, and I couldn't live with someone who would use such serious allegations as manipulation tools. I let my lawyer handle all communication with Linda and her attorney going forward. Linda hired a respectable attorney to represent her in the divorce, and she initially tried to argue for spousal support based on Linda's income and her years as a homemaker. However, the documented pattern of false accusations worked against Linda in the divorce proceedings. The court was not sympathetic to spousal support requests when the circumstances included repeated false police reports and a clear attempt to manipulate the situation for financial gain. I was happy that I wasn't tied up with Linda with any children. The divorce process took about a year to complete. During that time, Linda and Ashley had to face the reality of their financial situation without me. They had to move out of my house within 60 days because it was not considered marital property. Ashley lost all the things I covered for her, including the college fund I'd been building for her. Linda was forced to work full-time for the first time in years, but even with increased hours, she couldn't maintain the lifestyle they'd gotten used to while I was supporting them. They moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment and had to give up most of the luxuries that my income had provided. The final divorce settlement was straightforward. I kept my house and some other things. Linda received her personal belongings and monetary settlement, since that was what she wanted. Ashley lost all the financial benefits she'd been receiving from me. What struck me most during this process was how quickly Ashley's attitude toward me changed once she realized the financial consequences of her actions. She went from making accusations to begging me to stay and pay their bills. This confirmed that the accusations had never been about genuine discomfort or inappropriate behavior. They had been about control and manipulation. I've heard through mutual friends that Ashley has had behavior problems at school since the divorce. Apparently, the manipulation tactics she used on me don't work as well in other settings, and she's learning that most people won't tolerate being threatened or lied to. The whole experience taught me that some people will destroy relationships and families for short-term control or attention, without considering the long-term consequences. Ashley got temporary power over me through false accusations, but she ultimately lost the financial security and college opportunities that my support had provided. Most importantly, I learned that walking away from toxic relationships is sometimes the only solution, even when it means disappointing people who depend on you financially. Linda and Ashley had created a situation where I couldn't stay without risking my reputation, my freedom, and my mental health. Leaving was difficult, but it was the only way to protect myself from people who were willing to lie to the police to get their way. Sometimes, the people who claim to need you most are actually the ones who are most dangerous to your well-being. Ashley's false accusations could have resulted in criminal charges, end of business, and permanent damage to my reputation. The financial cost of divorce was much less than the potential cost of staying in a situation where I was constantly vulnerable to false claims. Looking back, I wish I'd recognized the pattern earlier and left after the first or second accusation. But I kept hoping that Ashley would outgrow this behavior and that Linda would eventually see the truth about what was happening. Instead, the situation escalated until it became dangerous for me to remain in my own home. The security cameras that I'd installed to protect myself ended up being the evidence that saved me from criminal charges. If I hadn't had that footage, Ashley's final accusation might have resulted in a conviction and prison time. The investment in a security system was the best money I ever spent, because it provided objective evidence that contradicted Ashley's lies. Today, I'm grateful that Ashley made that final false accusation, because it forced me to make a decision I should have made years earlier. Her lies ultimately freed me from a relationship that was destroying my life and gave me the opportunity to start over with clear boundaries and realistic expectations about family relationships.